Authoritarianism is possible under leftist modes of thought. It's just a lot more difficult to justify. And that is one of the fundamental differences between the left and the right, and the big reason why I only have a problem with one of them.
The irony, it's just, oh my, the irony here is so dense, I'm afraid this video will create a singularity that will rip apart the YouTube continuum.
That'd be awesome content. I hope it does.
Good afternoon, suckers! As your Republican candidate, I am here to deliver a message. I am here to make you angry. I am here to make you afraid, to lie to you and tell you that nothing is your fault.
It's the irony.
Yeah.
Irony alert, guys. Just went off the Richter scale.
I watched this. By the way, this video just came out. This is not like from a year ago. This video is like from this week. I was like, I can't believe this. The irony here of only saying or pretending that it's Republicans that try to make their constituents afraid. That's right. Only Republicans that try to say everything that's wrong in the world is not your fault. How can you operate this blindly in this kind of space?
Well, you have to be an idiot. That's the criteria, Sitch. You didn't understand that? You have to be stupid. You have to shut your brain completely off. You'd be a complete partisan moron.
It's very easy for us to see the faults of our enemies and ignore the faults of our teammates, right? That is classic.
Of course.
Jonathan Haidt's morality binds us and then blinds us.
Right. Yes. Binds us into teams to fight against other teams and blinds us to all our stupidity.
Yes. Yeah, you look at the other team and you're like, look at all that bad stuff they're doing. It's so obvious. How do they not see it? How does anyone support this? It's so obvious. Meanwhile, you're like jumping on every rake, walking off every cliff with your team.
Let's see here. So these things are supposed to make you feel good, Sitch. Let me just throw out some terms here for you.
Okay.
Trans genocide, white supremacy, the end of democracy. Are you feeling better now? Do you feel good?
I feel so happy and positive and optimistic about the future.
Don't you now? Don't you? Look, those,
you forgot one.
Those are the good feelings.
You forgot one. Fascism.
Oh, fascism. That's right. Yes. Yeah. As soon as democracy dies, we'll install fascism. Fascism. Yeah.
But the difference
good feelings.
I know. The difference is, and I've had this conversation with people on the left. If you ask them, you say, wait a minute. The left does all this victimization stuff too. By the way, the right does do all this victim stuff. I'm not.
Of course they do. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the left obviously does it just as much, if not more. I'd say
transing all of your kids.
Right. Yeah. Groomers, transing all of your kids, the deep state, we don't live in a democracy, blah, 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 all this stuff. But when I have this conversation with people on the left and I bring this and they say this point to me, I hear this so much. They say, oh my God, the right is the party of victimhood, of white grievance. I say, wait a minute. The entire left strategy is about like victimhood and grievance and everyone's racist and sexist and transphobic, and they're out to get you. What's the difference? And they look at me blankly for like 10 seconds, and then they say, yeah, but the difference is it's actually happening on the left.
Yeah, it's all true.
That's the difference. It's true. It's the only difference.
White supremacy is real.
Oh, of course. Of course.
I am here to tell you that your way of life is under assault from the woke mob. People always ask, what do you mean by woke? I'll tell you what I mean by woke. I mean black people. I mean gay people. I mean trans people. I mean women. Women who don't buy into my shtick. Not you women who are here today. You are definitely not woke. I mean teachers who want to teach your kids anything that makes you uncomfortable.
The irony, it's just, oh my, The irony here is so dense. I'm afraid this video will create a singularity that will rip apart the YouTube continuum.
That'd be awesome content. I hope it does.
I'm just imagining the inverse of all this. I'm here to tell you that you live in a white supremacy, that you're surrounded by racists who are trying to teach your children that slavery was good. That
You're right. You're right.
That we should be living in a white country for white people. Like, oh my God. It's just, it writes itself.
It does. Yeah.
It's a good wig, though.
I mean, anything you don't like or you don't understand. I mean, anything I think will make you upset that I can blame on the Democrats. I am here to stand up against cancel culture because I don't think anyone on our side should ever be held accountable for anything we've said or done. I am here to stand up for law and order, by which I mean we should make the laws and we should impose the order. And when I say we, I mean people like me, not people like you.
This is crazy. You can watch this totally unironically.
I know. Isn't it? I just, it's hard to put myself in the headspace of watching this unironically and not just realizing this could very easily just be reversed. Like this could, like, if I never was familiar with Steve Shives, I would watch this and think this is some sort of genius level Andy Kaufman-esque troll. But it's not.
No.
This is real. This is real. Okay, so that was it for this. I wanted you to get the taste in your mouth of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, ouch.
One of the
So here's another.
Never say that again.
Oh, you don't want to get the taste in your mouth?
Don't say. Never say that again.
Just get that taste in your mouth. Just a little sample. Okay. Just get a little whiff of Steve. A little whiff of Steve Shives, Adam. I just want you to get a little taste of Steve, just to prepare you, like you get the little sorbet. You put
Everybody's logging off now. I'm getting ready to log off.
Okay, this video is called Why I'm Okay with the Far Left, but Not the Far Right. Interesting.
The most counterproductive and honestly corrosive elements of political discourse is false equivalence. I talk about politics a lot, and I go after conservatives and Republicans a lot, and sometimes I get comments from people who apparently think they're making a point when they say, oh, sure, Steve, you say all this stuff about the Republicans, but I bet you wouldn't say it about the Democrats. Would?
Is Steve Shives coming out as an enlightened centrist here?
No. I hate to break it to you, but no. And let it be known, this video right here,
right?
This came out after his Republicans Say the Quiet Parts Loud video. Okay. That we just watched. So
ironic.
I feel like I'm just guessing here. I feel like when he put that video out, he got some comments, and this video is a response to that. That'd be my guess. Okay.
He got some commentary like the commentary we just delivered?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So this video is but when we say it, it's true. There is a trans genocide. There is white supremacy. Republicans are writing into law that slavery was good. That's just such a gross mischaracterization of what's going on. Can you imagine such a thing? Teaching a whole class about the pros of slavery? Come on,
I know.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
It's also interesting too, that video that we just watched, the Republicans Say the Quiet Parts Loud, that video in the last 3 weeks got him the most views easily on his channel with over 200,000 views.
Wow. Okay. So people really liked it.
People really liked that. Yeah. Interesting.
Would you? Well, no, I wouldn't say the same things I say about the Republicans, about the Democrats. If I could truthfully do that, I wouldn't be a Democrat, but I am. Both parties are the same is an easily debunked claim made by people who only get away with it because the people they're saying it to are too lazy to be skeptical of it. Both major American political parties have their problems, to be sure, big problems, but one of them, the Democratic Party, is clearly preferable to the other. They're not the same, and anyone who says they are the same is either a clueless person trying to sound smart or a smart person trying to mislead you because they assume you're the clueless one.
So I think you can say, I don't agree with the idea when I hear this. People say this is a uniparty. The Democrats and Republicans are the same. That's very clearly not accurate. Very clearly, the Democrats and Republicans have different goals, different views about the things that they want to accomplish, and they hate each other's guts very clearly and try to destroy each other on a daily basis.
Well, this came up in a stream recently between us, and we had a little back and forth about it that I clipped out because I thought it was interesting. And we got a lot of response from our audience saying that you and I were mischaracterizing what they mean by the uniparty.
Right. So I was about to explain that.
Okay.
So what I think people mean when they say the uniparty, well, everyone means it differently, but I think, some people mean it if they're on the left, they mean, oh, both parties are capitalist. If you're more on the right, you say, well, none of the parties are populist, right? They're both, neoliberal, or they're both, trying to maintain some kind of established order that will keep them in power, but they don't want to do whatever the radical, or the more radical, I should say, policies that maybe the person who calls them a uniparty wants, right?
Right, like radical progressives or radical right-winger.
Right. Yeah, radical right-wingers or populist or whomever, right? So I think that's generally what people mean. But I think the problem is it's just I think the way of saying it is a lazy shorthand for an idea that's a lot more complicated than simply saying that both parties are the same, because obviously they're not. And I don't think it's effective. I don't think it's effective persuasion, because you say it to someone, you say it to a normal person, they're like, well, I know that's just literally not true. I don't even know how you could even say that. You could say that there's overlap. Obviously, both parties presumably believe in a liberal democracy, one hopes. Both parties believe in capitalism, one hopes. But it doesn't mean that both parties are just the same. I feel like that's a short-sighted way of saying it. But I don't think that's what Shives means here in this segment. I think he means literally saying, like, well, if one party is bad, then other party bad. I think he's kind of looking at it from a different perspective.
Right. It would be interesting. I'm not sure. I don't know that I've seen enough of the video to know what perspective he's coming from. Just to speak for the voice of the audience, the chief response we got to that clip was that there are certain industries, big pharma, healthcare, military industrial complex, that are untouchable by our politicians. That's what people are saying. Right. I don't know that that is an untrue claim.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, because Joe Biden, old man Biden, the Biden administration just passed. Well, they passed it a while ago, but it's just kind of come into effect supposedly recently. Where this legislation, I think it was part of the Inflation Reduction Act last year, but it just kicked in this year, where Medicare will now be able to negotiate, the government will be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies on certain drugs to get the price lowered.
Wow. Okay. So that's good.
Yeah, there were 10 drugs. It was now they claim it's like the 10 most expensive, most used drugs by people on Medicare. And they claim that the government's going to be able to now negotiate. Because I didn't realize this. Apparently, under Bush, they made it literally illegal for the government to be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies.
I seem to remember that.
Yeah. And now that's not the case. The government can negotiate with pharmaceutical companies, supposedly most other Western democracies in the world. Obviously, the government has this ability, so they're going to help lower the price. That would at least contradict the fact that no one's willing to stand up to the pharmaceutical companies, because the pharmaceutical companies are all enraged by this, obviously. They're claiming this is going to make it so they can't develop new drugs, blah, 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 blah. And Nikki Haley and other Republicans have referred to this law as
fascism.
No, socialism.
Okay.
So there you go. It's interesting. It's interesting. To me, that really shows you the line between the right-wing populists, who some of them would probably be in favor of such an action, and the sort of more classically neoliberal right-wingers who obviously are more shills for big business.
The more I read of history, the more it's impressed upon me that a lot of these policies that are populist policies are put in place to avoid socialism.
Yes.
So I think some sort of price controls on drug. I think people getting price gouged for drugs, their families getting price gouged.
You said price controls. That's the dirty word.
Fuck it. Look, I don't. Yes, they want to turn price controls into socialism. Okay. Look, now there's going to be a bunch of comments saying, "Oh, that is socialism."
Well, they're not price controlling. Well, I guess it depends on
how are they not? If you're negotiating price, if you're saying you're not going to pay us over a certain amount, yeah, you're controlling the price.
Right, but this isn't for the private sector. It's only for Medicare. Now, obviously, it will have some repercussion. People are assuming in the private industry as well for private people and private insurers, how much they pay. Right.
Right. These are inelastic goods. If you have cancer, you need the cancer drug. If you need insulin, you need insulin or you die. Right.
Right. I'm just saying there is a difference. Now, you can argue that they'll have some similar consequences, but there's a difference between the government saying, if you want Medicare patients to be able to get your drug, we will only pay you X. That's very different than saying, if you want to sell our drug to anyone in this entire country of America, it has to cost this.
If water companies want to monopolize water and charge obscene amounts of money for water, the point is that is inevitably going to lead to socialism. Right. That's going to be people stepping in and saying, no, we want a command economy.
Right.
So, I mean, you kind of have to do this balancing act.
Yeah.
And I just if you're going to live in a situation where people are getting gouged for medicine, that's going to lead to socialism. This is why people are interested in socialism now. This is why there's the uptick in socialism right now. This is why people are not offended by the term socialism.
Yeah.
So when Nikki Haley comes out and says, listen, these are price controls, this is socialism, people are like, good. Steve Shives goes to his YouTube channel and says, that's right. One party hates your guts and wants to basically see you die in bed because you can't get the medicine that you need to live because you can't afford it.
Right.
Because your job sucks. Hassan's popularity is because of these price controls. Look, Nikki Haley is being a mouthpiece for big pharma.
Yeah.
How is she not?
Yes.
So the people in the comments that are making the uniparty argument are making the argument against Nikki Haley in this case.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. If you're going to leave comments saying, look, those are price controls, that's socialism, you are supporting the uniparty.
Right. Well, and it's you brought up a good point too, which is that Nikki Haley. I was going to talk about this later in the stream, but we can talk about it now. Nikki Haley calling it socialism. This is what I've been talking about how the right has cried wolf on socialism and weakened the word, essentially.
Of course.
Actual socialism, number one. And number two, the even more pernicious effect of this is that if the Democrats or the Republicans or anyone does some public policy, passes some legislation that is widely liked, because by the way, the polling was something like 89% of Democrats are in favor of this and 77% of Republicans were in favor of this. Okay, so this is a widely liked thing. If this is a widely liked policy and a bunch of Republicans come out and they label it socialism, all that does is then the socialists like Richard Wolff come in and they get to say, ha, socialism is when the government does things. See, you should all be socialists now. Isn't this good? Isn't this good? Don't you want this? This is socialism. And they use that to basically trick the younger generation into adopting socialism.
Right. Which is the abolition of private property.
Right.
Which is forming a business as an independent person illegal.
Right.
Which abolishes the worker-employee relationship. That's socialism.
Yeah.
It's actually employer-employee relationships.
Right.
Correction.
But sometimes the folks who make these comments get a little more clever about it. They take it one step further. They don't speak in terms of political parties, but in terms of ideologies. They say, oh, sure, Steve, you're always attacking the far right, but I notice you never attack the far left. Correct. Again, there's the unspoken assumption on the part of people who say things like this that they're saying something particularly insightful and cutting, like they've just nailed my feet to the floor on some critical point. How, they seem to be asking, can I regard those on the far right of the political spectrum as enemies, but not those on the far left? Aren't both groups extremists? Doesn't that make them the same? Or at least equally bad? I mean, no. Well, yes, I suppose by definition they are both extremists if in our visualization of the range of political thought we place them on opposite ends of that range. But are they the same or equally bad? No, I think they are. And my argument is not that leftists are all good and pure people and leftist ideologies are all infallible and would inevitably lead to a better society. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I believe. Leftists are not immune from ignorance or bigotry or ambition or corruption or any of the other things that lie at the root of inequality, injustice, bad government, and all the other social and political ills that afflict our society. The USSR was leftist in character, at least to a degree. I was not a fan. Authoritarianism is possible under leftist modes of thought. It's just a lot more difficult to justify. And that is one of the fundamental differences between the left and the right, and the big reason why I only have a problem with one of them. Authoritarianism is a problem no matter which side of the political spectrum it originates from. Authoritarian socialism is a thing, but nowadays those who hold to it aren't really shown much respect.
So he makes this very interesting claim here, where he says, it's harder for the left to justify authoritarianism than the right. And I find that interesting because if you look at, if you compare authoritarian left-wing communist countries to authoritarian right-wing fascist countries, there's been a lot more authoritarian left-wing communist countries by far.
There's a lot now.
There still are, right. There still are.
China.
So it's a very weird claim, but it's very interesting, the psychology, when he gets into this, that I think creates this illusion in people's minds that allows them to think this.
I don't like... He's bad how? I mean, you got to say good or bad in relationship to some motive. So obviously, if your motive is to spread socialism, obviously you're going to think the party that endorses socialism is better.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that's true, whether or not we should be spreading that ideology is
right.
the more fundamental question. So
yeah, but my understanding is that he's saying he's not a socialist, but he just sees the socialist as less of a problem than the quote fascist.
Right.
Like he's a progressive who still believes in capitalism.
My question is
right?
why?
Well, he's going to explain.
Okay, good.
They're dismissed and derided as tankies and shoved off into their own little corner of the movement. That's not how it is on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not saying every right-winger is an authoritarian, or at least a professed one, but most of them seem completely fine letting the authoritarians run the show. It's the opposite of how things are arranged on the left. On the right, it's the anti-authoritarians who are relegated to their own little corner where no one pays attention to them. Which, in this case, I understand, since the most avowed anti-authoritarians on the right are libertarians who don't deserve to be taken seriously because they're a deeply unserious group of people who regard not being able to buy as many guns as they want for any reason as an intolerable tyranny. Fuck libertarians. They're the loser nerds of the right. They ought to be shoved into lockers and left there. It's the authority.
I wonder if he feels the same way when they were the nerds on the left voting for free speech back in like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I love that he's all like, oh, the authoritarian right wingers are so bad, they're such a problem. The only people that aren't authoritarian right wingers are not the only people, but the biggest group that aren't authoritarian right wingers are libertarians, but they're all losers that should be shoved into lockers.
Right.
It's like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't you be
Are you against authoritarianism or what?
Shouldn't you be supporting them? Like, I don't understand. You're like, no, these are like the anti-authoritarian right wingers all suck. They're all losers and cucks. It's like, well, wait a minute, what is happening? Oh my God. It's
Great
just
point.
What is the goal here, I guess? It's I don't know. It's fascinating to me. Mixed messaging, Steve.
Authoritarians who dominate right-wing discourse. And right-wing politics has had a decidedly authoritarian bent since long before I was born.
Well, also, there's a complete... I do believe that that one of the reasons I don't like Trump is that I don't think Trump is a person who's motivated by ideological principles at all. I think he's a person that's motivated by just, I want to do whatever I want to do, period. He doesn't really care about, in my opinion, he doesn't really care about rule of law or precedent or anything else. He's just going to try to do whatever he wants to do, essentially. And I do think that can breed to sort of an authoritarian position, depending on the support he gets. But what Steve kind of misses, and what a lot of people on the left miss, is that the perception, whether they agree with it or not, the perception on the right is that there's this kind of authoritarian top-down, how would I describe it? There's a top-down plan or malaise that kind of comes from the left, where the left is kind of out to get everyone on the right, to call everyone racist. That comes not just through the government, but comes through culture. In this, this top-down cultural blanket that just controls everything. And I don't think you're going to understand the right or the right's position without seeing that or understanding that. Even if you disagree with it, I think you still need to understand what the argument is.
Yeah, they simplify their opposition in a way that's unhelpful to actually understanding them. Like there are so many different voices on the right that are often in conflict with one another. They're just at the Daily Wire. There's a bunch, I don't think Ben Shapiro holds the same kind of views on Christian nationalism, an Orthodox Jew,
right,
as Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh. So there's a giant difference there.
Well, is it authoritarian? And this is part of the problem too, because of the reason that you would need an authoritarian government would be that their culture or the environment is against whatever the government wants. And so you need the government to come in and control everything. Because if the culture and the environment is doing exactly what you want, you don't need an authoritarian government to come in and dictate it, right? Because it's just doing what you want already. And I feel like, so, you can criticize Trump all you want, and that's fine. I'm on board with that. But there is this complete lack of acknowledgement that, the reason I don't think the left, from a government standpoint, from a legal standpoint, they have in some regards, obviously. But in some regards, they haven't been so authoritarian, quote, authoritarian or more dictatorial, is because there's no need to, because the culture is already bent to that will. I mean, it was very bizarre. It's very bizarre being my age and seeing an environment where when I grew up, basically all the corporations were, kind of working with the Republicans and were perceived as and definitely acted as kind of right-wing institutions that were just kind of concerned about making money. And now the perception, and I think the reality, is kind of completely reversed, where all the corporations are very woke and they're just so terrified of social media, so terrified of normal media and of being canceled, that they have to just do this constant virtue signal to sort of progressive politics.
Right. No,
And
and
is
that's
that
not enshrined in law
right?
anywhere.
But
Yeah.
is that not an authoritarian culture where, all of these institutions, all these corporations, all of schools, right, have, and so many of our media institutions have kind of a dominant progressive ideology that if you sway from, you can get canceled, you can get fired, you can get in all sorts of trouble, but really only if you sway from it from the left. It's unless you're like working in some like specific right-wing institution, which are, few and far between, you can really kind of crap on the right as much as you want, and you're not gonna get in that much trouble, from mainstream culture at all.
That much trouble? Any trouble? What trouble are you going to
Right.
get in?
Well, there is a line. There is a line eventually. You really just have to go for it. Like even the lady, I forget her name, the lady for the New York Times who the New York Times hired her, and then she had all these tweets where she was like really racist against white people. And they still hired her after that came out. They didn't fire her. And the only reason they fired her was because she kept complaining publicly about some employee that someone made some claims about. Do you remember this? They made some claims about that they made like a sexual comment or a crude comment or something that were kind of like BS.
Yeah.
And the New York Times was kind of like, this is even too ridiculous for us to like care about. And she just kept complaining publicly. So they eventually had to fire her.
Do you,
yeah.
If the culture, a lot of people believe that we're in a culture war right now. I think the Daily Wire talks about the culture war constantly. Right. If that culture war is resolved to someone's advantage, let's say just everyone decides to side with one side or the other, the trad cons or the
woke
progressives, the woke progressives. Yeah.
Okay.
Which do you think is more likely to be the dominant culture going forward after this, whatever it is, that catalyzes everyone on one side or the other?
I don't think it's going to be a binary like that.
No, I'm just saying, let's suppose like aliens come down and say, listen, we've implanted you with a virus and you are going to die in 24 hours if you do not choose a side.
Well, okay. Let me not answer that hypothetical. Let me just answer the actual question.
No, I like the alien hypothetical better.
This is what I think will happen. I do think that there is a pushback that's happened and is continuing to happen, is continuing to build against wokeness. This is where predictions get tricky. I think if the trend continues, I would argue that wokeness will kind of go away for the most part. It won't fully go away. There will be remnants of it. It will always exist in a much less capacity. But I think people will get tired of it, and there will be some resurgence of sort of like far right tradcon, gobbledygook stuff. But I don't think it's going to take over the way wokeness took over. I don't think it's going to supplant it to like a complete supplanting of wokeness.
Right.
But if Trump wins, everything could change, because then the left could start using wokeness to attack Trump again. And I don't know if they'll see whether it's useful or not. And that kind of changes all the calculations. So.
Right. So you're saying the dominant culture will be a conservative culture? I don't know
if I would even say that. I think the dominant culture will be not woke. But.
Enlightened centrism is not even in the running. We're not even on the
aware.
field.
I know. It's not an option. I understand.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
so
I'm not saying
there is like a conservative culture, a conservative populist culture that wants renewed interest in things like family values and a much different kind of decency. Like if both parties were using the term decency, I think the left would say decency is using whatever pronoun somebody wants you to use, right? Without giving them a bunch of flack.
Right.
And if you said decency on the right, it would be something like family values, respect for tradition, right? It's totally different understandings of the word decency. But if one of those cultures, and I think both of those cultures are predominant out there in the world, you think the conservative culture would be the one to take over?
I think conservative culture will become more dominant than woke culture in the future. I just don't think it will become the mainstream culture.
Right.
So that'd be my guess.
But right now, wokeness, you do agree, is the mainstream culture.
Obviously. Yes.
Right. Okay.
100%. So, I mean, we just had
both
this
of them
year.
are fighting for the dominant culture.
I know. Like we had this year, remember the Uber DEI chief was fired because she was like, listen, we shouldn't call white women Karens. It's kind of racist. And they're like, what? How dare you? And they fired her over that.
I don't know if the aliens implanted the virus and you had to decide in 24 hours. I think preference falsification might play a chief deciding role, and people might decide conservative culture. It's an interesting. I mean, I'd like to see how that plays out. I don't know that you can measure it on a survey at this point. Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.